all my years on Fox, this was a southern border problem. And everybody where I lived in New York could just be like, it's America. We accept immigrants. Illegal, legal. What's the problem? They take the jobs that nobody else wants, right? That's the line up in the Northeast. And now people like Governor Greg Abbott of Texas are getting smart and shipping the immigrants, the illegal immigrants, to places like Washington, D.C. and New York City and saying, here's what the problem is. You live with this, and then you tell us what a non-problem it is. In New York City, the homeless shelters right now are being overrun with asylum seeking migrants. There are nearly 3,000 who've arrived in just recent weeks, says the mayor, Eric Adams. He's calling on President Biden to send additional federal resources immediately so that they can handle the overflow, saying if we don't get these resources, we're not going to be able to provide the level of support that anybody here deserves. And he says, look, the burden included families arriving on buses sent by the Texas and Arizona governments. And he says, actually, the federal government sends some here too. And the White House didn't respond to a request for comment. But, we heard those stories early on by the Post and others about all these migrants being blown up to Westchester County, New York, and then driven off somewhere. We didn't know where. I think it's good that non-southern border towns are having to experience this.
Well, and that's the idea, too. When I asked Governor Greg Abbott, what is the difference between you sending buses of migrants, to Anywhere USA versus the NGOs doing it, both with taxpayer dollars? What's the difference, really? And he said it's really to move these people out of the communities along the border and to bring them to the backyards and the doorsteps of Washington, D.C. And I think it's really interesting that the mayor in New York brings up that these buses are coming from Texas and Arizona. They're not. The buses are strictly going to Washington, D.C. I talked to the governor's spokesperson last night. They've sent 135 buses, roughly about 5,100 people, to Washington, D.C. NGOs, they all post about how grateful they are for these free bus tickets, because if they have a destination in the Northeast, Washington, D.C. is close and it's a good option. So they voluntarily get on this bus, which Muriel Bowser had said that they were being tricked into, but they're voluntarily getting on these buses. They get asked. They aren't forced on any buses from what these NGOs tell me. And they literally post on their social media pages, thank you. We're incredibly grateful for these free buses to Washington, D.C. and to the East Coast. So these people that they're seeing in New York are from ICE releases. They are from people not staying in Washington, D.C. either and migrating up to New York and to other northeastern states. So it's really interesting. But we do know that NGOs are busing people all over as well. They're bringing them to San Antonio. From San Antonio, they get on a Greyhound bus from there and they go somewhere else. And that is all through government contracts. These NGOs are non-government organizations, but they work directly with CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection. As soon as they're processed, they're brought to these NGOs and dropped off. Now, ICE releases are a little bit different. They're in a detention facility. Then the ICE buses will basically take them to San Antonio as well. They'll drop them off at the airport. I've witnessed this several times where they drop off busloads. 75 single adult men get off, mostly Venezuelans, the one that I saw, and they were all going to Chicago, right? So we're seeing all of this happen. And there's always the finger pointing in the blame game. But Governor Abbott has maintained and has always said, every community is a border community. Now they're just feeling it. And, everybody's been talking about the financial impacts of this and what this will look like. Governor Abbott saying every single migrant costs the state of Texas $30,000 a year. That's for any kind of medical care, that's for schooling, that's for all of the, access that they have to things once they're here. And so that is going to be felt throughout the nation, but they're just seeing it right now. It's kind of more of a tangible thing with all of these people showing up and maxing out their shelters, like what the border communities have been dealing with for years now.
So what's the story? And I'll get to what Mayorkas, the head of DHS, is saying on this. It's unbelievably disconnected. But what's the story with the drugs? Because if all of these people are just getting on the buses and going left, right, north, south, and so on, what's the story with all the fentanyl and all the cocaine in particular that we saw is up now in record numbers in June in terms of what they're bringing across the southern border? How does that happen? I understand the southern border is essentially run by the cartels now, but how do they get those drugs in? I assume they're not packed in like a little Toomey suitcase on the bottom of the Greyhound, but how is that working?
So there's a couple of ways that this is happening. Number one, it's happening a lot with a drug smuggling option. So they're using vehicles, things like that, and they're going through and they're catching the majority of them at these checkpoints because they have the technology. They have drug sniffing canines. They have, these X-ray machines that they drive through where they can see the drugs taped up in the wheel wells. They can see all these things. The thing that the governor, he's proud of that. He's, proud that the state of Texas stops all those drugs from coming in, but that's not through Operation Lone Star. Operation Lone Star is his own kind of operation that he implemented a few years ago, about 2 years ago now, where it's additional resources from the state of Texas that basically go after drug smugglers. They have the right to arrest for trespassing, things like that. And they, again, deployed additional resources. So what the governor talks about often, and we're seeing this right now, I actually have a friend of mine, another journalist who's in the Big Bend sector right now. And what's happening with a lot of the drug smuggling is it's coming in through the holes. When these borders are unmanned, which we know that they are right now because they're so maxed out processing and transporting these hundreds of migrants that are coming over every day, they're coming over in groups of 500. So when that happens and you're already short-staffed along the border, all of your resources go to that. That's a humanitarian crisis in its own. Just like we see them force families across with little ones when the river's high because Amistad Lake Dam is out. And so they've got very, very inhumane conditions that they have to cross in. Cartel and coyotes, you said they run the border. They know these things. So what they're doing is they're forcing across these families to create a humanitarian crisis so that over here, we can sneak in drugs and we can sneak in people and we can force people across over here while they're distracted with this shiny object over here. And that's happening every day. And they are getting caught. They are getting caught with bundles of weed, of fentanyl, of cocaine on their backpacks, 50-pound packs that these people are carrying. And that's happening in more of these remote areas in the middle of the desert. And again, when you don't have the resources to stop all of that, and you don't have the resources to plug the holes because the wall is not done, contrary to most people's beliefs, you've got problems and you're going to have drugs getting in and a lot of gotaways. We're at 490,000 known gotaways for last year or for this year, excuse me. That is the ones that they see on cameras or the ones that they see in a bailout pursuit and they are not caught.
And by the way, let me interrupt you. The gotaways are not counted in the 1.7 million that we're at thus far and counting 3 months before the end of the fiscal year.
No, they are not.
If you're like me, you're growing more and more concerned about the future. The market's all over the place. Don't even look. It's just depressing. And inflation's at its highest level in 40 years. Interest rates are up. Market experts are predicting a recession, and they're using terms like economic hurricane and unprecedented. You never want to hear the U word when it comes to the economy. If you want to protect your future, call a precious metal dealer I trust, American Hartford Gold. They can show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying. You got to diversify your portfolio with physical gold and silver. All it takes to get started is a short phone call, and they will have physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside your IRA or 401k. Super easy. And they keep it simple. They're the highest rated firm in the country with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. And as an exclusive offer for my fans, if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver and a free safe on qualifying orders. Don't wait. Call them now. The number's 866-518-2955. 866-518-2955. Or if you prefer, you can text my name, Megyn, to 65532. Again, that's 866-518-2955 or text MEGYN to 65532. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.